Hi everyone, my name's Carlos Eiene, and I create jazz music for video games. Today I'm going to demonstrate one of my original compositions called Genesis, and how I made it work with interactive music. I've composed the song to demonstrate a few different aspects of game audio, including looping music seamlessly, transitioning between sections, and muting instruments during the loop itself. This is somewhat of a tutorial, and somewhat of me just showing you how I made it happen. So I'll start off by playing the music for you in its entirety, including all the implementation stuff I did. I'll also be showing you on screen me actually playing the parts. And then afterwards, we'll dive into Reaper and Wwise, and I'll show you how I implemented it. So, here's the music. Cool, so I hope you enjoyed the music. We'll start by taking a look at this project in Reaper, which is my DAW of choice. Awesome, so here's the project file in Reaper. I have it organized and split up into the different sections of songs, which is how you want to do it for implementing interactive music like this. The project here is split up into a couple of separate regions, which is a feature of Reaper that lets you define an area of the project to segment off from the rest of it. So these first two are two different takes of the A mix of the song. This isn't like an A or B section of a jazz tune or anything. This is like a whole composition is like, we'll call that A. I made two different takes of it to give it some sort of to give it some variation, and we'll be going over how to implement these into interactive music, so the program will automatically switch between them or randomly select them. So we have two takes of A. 2 takes of B right here. You can see that they're at different tempos. The B section is at 153 and is in 5/4, while the A section is this 173.87 is actually just a placeholder. It's just rubato. I don't know why it's specifically that, but it's just kind of funny. So we have A and B, and then I've also got a B to A transition right here, an ending clip, and then 2 different cymbal rolls, which I just recorded just to have some variation. So the first step is obviously you've got to compose the song, and I had to compose the song and record it. I did that pretty much linearly throughout the project, and then I rearranged the stuff in the project, so it was available in all these different. I could put them in different regions, which is really important for exporting. To get this stuff into Wwise, we'll be using the region render matrix here in Reaper, which is a fantastic tool for exporting all these different mixes. So essentially, you can access this by going up to File and then region render matrix right here. So essentially what I did was I selected all these regions by just going like this, and what that'll tell Reaper to do is to render out the area of time underneath each region as a separate audio file. That's really important for staying organized. If you look at the render dialog here, you can see that I've done a lot of I've included a lot of wildcards. This is super important for organization and making sure all your file names are set. So here it says region $region number. That'll put in the number of the region. So this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The region, $region, which is the name of the region itself. So A, take 1. Genesis Wwise demo, yep. And then tempo will include whatever the tempo is, I think at the beginning of whatever the export is, and time signature. This isn't necessary, but it is very helpful for exporting and keeping your stuff organized, especially as we use Wwise, we're going to tell Wwise what the tempo and time of each song is, and that helps us determine the loop points much easier. So to do this, you could hit the render button right here, but I'm going to add it to the render queue because we want to do a couple more renders for this, actually. One feature that I wanted to include when implementing this music was the ability to fade out certain groups of instruments. In this case, on the A mix, I want to be able to have the piano track stand on its own and then fade out the drums and bass behind it. So to do that, we're going to render out just the piano tracks for takes 1 and 2. And we'll do that by putting in piano right here. Add to render queue. Sure, overwrite that. That's fine. I've rendered these files up before. And then we'll do another one. We would do another one of by soloing the drums and bass, and then rendering the master mix just like this, and then calling this one drums bass. Okay, add to render queue. Cool. But you might be wondering, well, it looks like we can just render out the piano stems themselves. Why wouldn't we just go like this, render out the piano stem, render out the drum stem, render out the bass stem? And it's a totally understandable question. The problem with that is that I have some effects on the master track that wouldn't get rendered if you render the individual stems. If you go to the mixer panel view, I've got an EQ and a limiter on the master track that are affecting everything. So if you were to render out just the piano stem, just the drum bus stem, just the upright bass stem, we get those individual stems, but we wouldn't get the limiter on the master track or the EQ on the master track. So the tracks would sound a little bit different and wouldn't have the same volume. So to work around that, we use the render queue for that. So when that's all set, we can go to File, Queued Renders, and just hit Render All. And then Reaper will go through and start rendering out all the files separately. Awesome, so the render is all done. If you look over here in our Finder window, we can see that the files have been exported and named appropriately. So sorting alphabetically, we rendered out master takes of 1 and 2, which you won't necessarily need to use for this project, so we can just delete those. Probably shouldn't have rendered them anyway. But we have the drums and bass stem of take 1, piano stem of take 1 of A, drums and bass stem of take 2 of A, piano stem of take 2 of A, the entirety of take 1 of B, take 2 of B, a B to A transition, an ending segment, cymbal roll A and cymbal roll B, all as separate WAV files. And then here we have the BPM and the time signature listed at the end, which is really convenient. So let's hop over into Wwise, create a new project, and get all this stuff thrown in. So I've got Wwise booted up here now. We'll create a new project, Genesis Wwise demo video. Cool. So here's our default Wwise window. So I first start by making sure I'm in the interactive music layout over here. We're going to be working primarily in this interactive music hierarchy right here. Underneath that, I'm going to create a new work unit. Call this Genesis for the song. And now we're going to drag and drop all of our audio files, just like this. So now the importer dialog appears, and all these files are going to be imported as music segments, which is exactly what we want. So let's just hit import, and it'll bring everything in. Now everything has appeared right here. These are all of our audio files. These are all music segments that house the original audio file within them. I was a little confused by this at first, but the best explanation I can give is, which is what I read from the Wwise website, is something like, if you have a song that you've made in a DAW, you'll have the actual audio tracks for that song within your project file for the DAW. Like if I had, in this case, the Genesis project file had the tracks for each individual instrument in there. So think of it like the music segment is the DAW project file, and these little blue things in there are the individual music tracks within that music segment. In this case, because we have the drums, bass, and piano takes, we're going to put them in the same music segment because they are the same take, just two separate tracks. Wwise has imported them by default as separate music segments, which we don't necessarily want. So I'm going to start off by dragging this piano into this music segment, which is take 1 into take 1, and the take 2 piano into right here. And we'll just rename this as O2A take 2, and then rename this as O1A take 1. Great, now we can get rid of these because we don't need them anymore. There we go, solid. Now if we click on this music segment, we can see that these two tracks are here. And if we hit the play button, it plays them both back together. I can mute each one individually. Solid. That's exactly what we wanted. Now that we've got everything imported into the project, we're going to start by making things loop. Looping music is really important for games because if the player is sitting on a screen for a long time, you don't want the music to stop. You want it to keep going. So it's important to get the music to keep playing. There are certainly compositional things to keep in mind with looping music, mainly that you want the end of your song to lead back nicely into the beginning, usually at the same time signature, same key, that kind of thing. But there's also some technical considerations as well, and one of the most important one is the appearance of the reverb tail at the end of the loop needs to appear at the beginning of the next loop. And there are a few different ways you can achieve that. Some DAWs have a function that let you bounce out audio on second pass, which will take the reverb tail from the very end of the song and put it at the beginning of it. So when you just loop that audio file by itself, it sounds fine. Sometimes this doesn't work too well if you have perhaps a cymbal at the end of your song that has a long reverb tail but doesn't necessarily appear at the beginning. The listener will hear this tail of the cymbal and be like, why is that there? There's no cymbal playing. So thankfully, Wwise has a solution for that where because it's an intelligent playback engine, it just keeps playing the song until the tail is gone. And that's one important thing to remember about your renders from Reaper or whatever your DAW is that you want to include pretty much the full reverb tail at the end of your export, which is why if we go back and look at the project in Reaper, you can see that the music ends right about here, but the length of the region extends all the way to over here. So this is the full reverb tail region that I wanted to include in the render out. So let's start by getting the loops done. This is actually probably easier to do if we start with the B section. The reason this is easier is because this is in time as opposed to the first one, which is rubato. So if we click on the music segment here, you'll see that we have time settings visible here. We can tell Wwise what the tempo and time signature of this song is, which is 153 BPM in 5/4, as it says so in our file name right here. And then we'll want to drag this end marker to the exact point where we want the loop to end. Now, this is really helpful if you, in this music segment editor down here, you right-click the ruler, change it to bars and beats, and it'll show you bars and beats just like a DAW would. Snap to bars and beats, and we'll want to zoom in and find out exactly where the end is. So the end is right here at bar 25, so I've dragged the end marker right to bar 25. What that means is that when the song is playing in a loop, once it hits the end point, here, it'll go back to the beginning, and it'll keep playing all the stuff after this end marker as the reverb tail, so it sounds seamless. So let's do the exact same thing for take 2, 153, 5, 4, snap to bars and beats. Yep, that's on. And then drag our marker to right here. So that's it. These are all set to loop properly. What we'll actually want to do to make them play back as loops, they're organized to loop. We need to make them play back as loops. You want to right-click on this, create a new parent music playlist container. This lets us specify how multiple segments of music are handled together. So we'll do this, and we'll call this Genesis B. And then we will drag. Well, right now, take 1 is in there. We're also going to put take 2 in there, because we want these two to alternate. So normally, if I just wanted the B section, like one take of B to repeat, here's what I would do. I would drag this music segment into here, which is the music playlist editor, and then I would select loop count to be infinite. So as it is right now, this playlist container is only going to play back take 1 infinitely, and it'll loop. So it plays back take 1. Wwise doesn't have a great way of auditioning the loop point itself. Something I like to do just for fun is turn up the playback speed like way up to 4, and then start playing through the song, and then turn it back to 1 when you get close to the loop point. It's a little silly, but it gets the job done. Okay, so loop point's coming up. There it is. Super smooth. The loop point is done on that song. Now what we're going to do is we're going to make it alternate between take 1 and take 2, or randomly select between take 1 and take 2. So what we do is we drag this music segment of take 2 that's already in this playlist container and put it in the playlist editor. When we do this, you'll likely want to select random continuous or random step. The random parts is what it's important here. To explain the difference between random continuous and random step, random continuous, it doesn't really apply here because there's only 2 things. The outcome will be the same. If there were a third segment, say there was like a take 3, right? What random continuous does is when this playlist is played or is instantiated and is like, all right, play this playlist, it will determine a random order to play everything in. So if there was a take 3 here, it would perhaps go take 2, 3, then 1. And it would specify that at the beginning of when that group was called up. What random step does is, instead of calling the order for all the segments, it'll just call up one random segment each time. Basically what that means is that random step will let you repeat certain segments randomly if you want that to happen. In this case, again, it doesn't really matter because either way, there's only 2 things, so the outcome is the same. So the thing you want to make sure is that loop count for these individual ones is set to 1, while the loop count for the continuous thing up here is set to infinite. This will continuously alternate between these 2 takes. So now this is set up for B. So if we play, you'll see it's playing from take 2 right now. If I stop, it plays from take 1 this time. And it'll just randomly pick 2, 2, 1, 1. Pretty cool. So let's set up the same thing now for take 1, because we have 2 takes of that, and we want them to alternate. The more difficult thing about take 1 is that it's rubato, so the loop point's a little harder to determine. And I think, in general, it's easier to work with loop points and finding, like, if you're looking for a precise point in your song, I think it works better if you pull it into a separate program. So we're going to open up Reaper, and we're going to open up a new project window and drop in take 1, drums, bass, and the piano. So now we've got all the tracks, or this rubato take here of take 1. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop a marker using Shift-M at the point where I want it to loop. And loop. Okay, so if we zoom in on that marker, our time code tells us that's at 1 minute, 10 seconds, and 173 milliseconds. That sounds about right. So what we'll go back into Wwise, and do the same thing. Or we'll set the endpoint accordingly. So we'll change this back to seconds since we're not using bars and beats for this this music segment. And then put the endpoint marker close there. And then we'll try and get it as close to as, well, what did I say? What was it? 110, 173, as close as possible to that. So 110. Oh, yeah, we're super granular now. It's 150, 173 is probably like right about here. So now this will loop. Well, once we put it in the playlist container, it'll loop right at that point. Sweet. So now let's do the same thing for take 2. Well, because it's actually the same piano take between the two. The drums and the bass are the only different things. But now these are all set to loop properly, and we'll do the same thing. We can actually select both of these. New parent music playlist container. Call that Genesis. Oops, not in all caps. Genesis A. And then we'll put take 1 here, and we'll put take 2 here. And then we will go back to the playlist and random continuous loop count infinite. So now it'll loop infinitely and cycle between randomly select take 1 or take 2. So if we do this, we can audition that. There's take 1 again, take 1 again. There's take 2. And that's just a useful way to add some variation. I could see this being expanded upon in quite a few different ways, specifically for jazz and game music, because there's a lot of opportunities here. Now we have looping segments of A and B that are randomizing between the two takes within them. And now I want to set up transitions between segments A and segments B. So we'll start off by creating a group of states. What states are parameters that the game can actually use. So whenever this is linked to a game, the game can call upon a certain state that is specified here in Wwise. So to do this, we'll go over to the Game Syncs tab, go to States, Default Work Unit, New Child, State Group, Genesis, just for this. Then we'll create a new child state. These are basically allowing the game to communicate with the sound engine and tell what the player is currently doing. So I envisioned this song being used as like a menu theme, sort of. You'd have the quiet mix or like the rubato mix being like your default menu theme. And then perhaps you're transitioning into something more like you're leaving the menu. You might transition to the B mix there. It's just a hypothetical. So in this case, we'll say, call this menu. We'll put another for menu quick. We'll use that for transitioning to state B. New child state. I misspelled quick. We'll do menu quiet. We'll use that for when we end up muting the drums and the bass in each of those mixes. And then new child state, we'll do menu exit, and this will be for when the player leaves the menu. So these are all the states that we'll be working with to control how the music is changing in real time as the player does these different events. So go back to audio. The important thing here is we need a way for Wwise to switch between these different playlists we've created. So as you'd imagine, new parent, switch container. And we'll call this just Genesis. So now this switch container contains the playlist A, the playlist B, and within playlist B, there's the different music segments of take 1 and take 2 of each of the A and B sections that it'll be switching randomly between. So lots of variation in here. We've got to set up the transitions now between A and B. So let's start by going from A to B. So to do this, we'll have the switch container selected. We'll want actually to state groups. Go down to here to the switch container association editor. Click this button, state groups, Genesis. Now we want to click and drag the playlists within the switch container to the state that we want to associate them with. So Genesis A should be with menu. So when the player is viewing the menu just normally, A should be playing. So we'll do that. And then this appears down here. You'll see menu, Genesis A. Conversely, when we want the music to accelerate, we'll have state B or Genesis B associated with menu quick. So that's it for now. Now, if we go to the switch container, we hit play, we select menu, it plays A. If we select menu quick, it plays state B. So that's working. However, if we start on menu, and while it's playing, switch to menu quick, nothing happens. What's up with that? Well, we can find out how the switch container is going between the different pieces of music by going to the transitions section. Every switch container has this default transition right here. And the default setting is exit source at exit queue, which means that in this specific instance, if I wanted to go from A to B, Wwise would wait all the way until the exit queue, which is this red thing we specified right here, for it to do the transition. That's a long time. We don't want that to happen. So we can fine-tune our transition by using the parameters in the transition menu. So we'll start off by going from A to B. Now, we probably want this to happen immediately. Then just change that to immediate. Now, with this transition, what I want to do is I want to have A fade out at a certain point, and I want to have a symbol roll, which is one of the ones I've recorded down here in symbol roll A and symbol roll B, come up and sort of mask that transition, and at the apex of the symbol roll, I want B to start. So I think it's there's a lot of troubleshooting you could do here, or a lot of ways that you could do this. I think that the best way to figure out your timing for this kind of thing is actually to open up your DAW and drag the files in yourself and then find out the timing. So let's open up Reaper. In this project here, we'll delete these tracks and remove the matrix. So, and I'll drag in drums, bass, separate tracks. So these are the A things, and then this will be B, which is the music we want it to go to, and then we'll have the symbol roll in the middle. So I'm basically going to set up like a hypothetical transition. Right. I'm going to specify a point at which the transition starts and then sort of manually figure out what I want the transition to sound like in here. Then we'll be replicating these settings inside Wwise. I think it's just much easier to do the figuring out of the settings in Reaper itself. So let's say we're listening to take A, and I want transition to happen right here, something like that. I just picked a random spot. So that's right at 592. So somewhere around here, we'll probably have the audio cut out right about here, and then do some sort of crossfade, kind of like this. I'm just kind of winging it right now. The important thing is that right at this exit point, or right at this point right here, the exit point of take A or state A will have the transition segment start. This is the transition segment. It's the symbol roll. And I said earlier at the apex of the symbol roll, I want B to start. So let's see how this sounds. It's easier to see, if it's easier to visualize this if you're looking at it in a DAW, just like this. So here's the transition. Okay, that was decent. That was decent. I think the fade could be out a little sooner. So maybe we do it so that the fade starts as soon as the symbol roll really starts picking up, which is where you can see the waveform becoming a little more visible right here. Let's audition this. Okay, actually, I kind of like the sound of that. Let's try and replicate these exact settings in Wwise. So if we go back to Wwise and look at the options for a fade out of the original source, we click the fade out button, and it gives us time and offset. What time is it time lets us control the duration of the fade out itself. So how long does it take from the music to be at 100% down and go down to 0%? The offset measures the distance between the exit point of the source and the end of the fade out. You might think it's between the exit point and the start of the fade out, but it's actually the end of the fade out. So right here we have it set so the fade out takes 2 seconds, and it will happen 2 seconds after, the fade out will complete 2 seconds after the exit point. So we can adjust these settings and replicate what we have set up here in Reaper so it looks exactly the same. So first let's find the fade out duration, and I'm just gonna select it like this. So this is the fade out duration. And if you look at our selector down here and we change it to minutes and seconds, it says duration is about 836 milliseconds. So we'll go back into Wwise, change time to 0.836. I don't know how granular let me get. Oh, exactly 836. Great. And then we'll extend this and measure from the end of the fade all the way to the start to the exit point we defined, and that's 1.951. You don't have to be super precise with this, but I find that it's just so much easier to audition these settings in your DAW first rather than having to try it out in Wwise over and over again. Wwise can be helpful for trying it, auditioning the transition at different points within the loop, but I think it's easier to fine-tune things in your DAW. So now if you look at this just visually, like this fade out's appearing here and it's a few seconds or like a little while after the exit point, it looks pretty much the same as it does in Reaper, just like this. So that's part of the transition. Now we've got to specify the transition segment that we're going to use. So I'm going to click here and go and select the cymbal roll, which is the same one that we used earlier. So the cymbal roll will play. And then we have to specify at what point is the transition over. At what point is the transition segment done? To do that, we'll want to go into the music segment containing the transition itself and set the exit point using the red thing, just like we did earlier for the loops. In this case, the exit point should be at the apex of the cymbal, just as we had it in Reaper, which is right about here. So now, if we play this back, it should work. It should work. So if we start on menu, and then go to menu quick, there you go. Worked like a charm, just like we did it. And doing this method of figuring out your parameters in a DAW first, I think will save you a ton of time. It made this process so much easier for me. So now we've got A to B. Now let's get B to A. So how do we get back? So we'll add another transition, specify B here, and then specify A as the destination. Now, for this one, we're not going to use a cymbal roll. We're going to use a specific B to A transition that I wrote. So here's the audio. So you'll notice that this is in time. It's the same time signature as B, and it's a coherent piece of music as opposed to just a cymbal roll. So that changes things on how we're going to implement it. So what I'm going to select is next beat. And if you recall, since we specified to Wwise what the time signature was and the tempo marking was for B right here, it'll say, where is it? It says 153 in here somewhere. Oh, I think it was right in here. Why does that not say? It may have overwritten it. Okay, override parent. Okay, there it is. Now it says 1, 2, 3, and 5, 4. So Wwise knows where the beats are in this song. So we can utilize that and tell it to transition on a beat specifically, which I think is a little more helpful in this specific section because the music is 5/4 and it's pretty rhythmic. So we'll select next beat. We'll want the transition segment to play, and that's going to be B to A transition. Now, if we start on menu quick and go to menu, it'll jump at the next beat. There you go. Great, and just like we did with the cymbal roll, we have to specify when that transition is over. So if we go into the transition, let's drag the endpoint to about here. I'll just play it. Right about 9 seconds, it feels like it should be over. We let that end note ring out a little bit. So what that'll say is that when the transition segment gets to this point, it'll play the menu music again, or menu take A. So let's try that out. Select the playlist, switch container, go to quick. So now, in theory, it should wait until the segment or the endpoint is reached. There you go. And now if you hear that, the transition segment is still sustaining underneath menu when it comes back around. So let's quickly fade that out so it doesn't do that. So I think we'll want like a 2-second, this one's less precise than the other one, but a 2-second fade and make it offset by about 1 second. So it starts fading out a little bit before, actually maybe 1.5. Yeah, or 0.5 actually. So it starts fading out a decent bit before the music comes back in. So let's give that a shot, just audition it. Super smooth. I like it a lot. Excellent. So now we've got an A to B and a B to A all set up. One last one that we're going to want to set up is how to exit the menu. So my vision was that the player would not be exiting the menu when they were in state B. They would only be exiting from state A. So we'll have state A going to nothing. When you're exiting, you want it to go to nothing. So there's got to be a way out. My thought is we do that immediately. Actually, let's audition this in Reaper first. So what I would probably do is, well, we have take one of A already in here, and then we'll put ending in, and we'll figure out what the transition is going to look like. So perhaps we do, let's group these. So the ending sounds like that. So I think we should probably have it fade out before the ending starts. Maybe a quicker fade out. Maybe we'll make it like about a second long. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. So now the duration of this is, yeah, just about a second. So we will add a fade out of the original audio. Fade out, time 1, offset 1, make it this curve. So now in theory, if we go from menu to menu exit has nothing associated with it, so it should move out immediately. There's the fade, which is what we wanted. However, we never specified the transition segment, so we'll put that in there. There's ending. So menu exit. Where'd it go? I put a number where I shouldn't have. If you click edit here, this time should be a 1 and offset should be 0. Otherwise, they'll start playing at the same time, and that'll get kind of confusing. So now the source will fade out, and then the ending will come in. So if you just run menu, go to menu exit, just as we wanted. Solid. That's what we wanted to hear. Now we've got it set up so we can go from A to B, we can go from B to A, and we can exit the loop from A. The last thing I wanted to do is to be able to mute and unmute the bass and the drums when we're in state A. So let's get that set up. So inside this playlist container, we have the music segments for take 1 and take 2 of A. I'm going to select drums and bass, go over to states up here, add state group, Genesis. Now, we can see that we can control the volume of each voice depending on the state we're in, which is exactly what we want to do. So when we're in menu quiet, what I want to do is set the drums and bass to -108. That's basically muting it. You're not going to hear that. And we'll do the exact same thing for the drums and bass in take 2 of Genesis. So we'll add state group Genesis, menu quiet, -108. So now that we're in the playlist container, one thing we have to do is we have to associate state A or Genesis A with menu quiet, just so it doesn't transition away from menu. We want it to stay on the same thing. So if we're on menu, the drums are muted. And if we go back to menu, they fade back in. Super cool. And the bass is about to come in a couple beats here. Okay, so the bass is in. Now if we do menu quiet, fades just to just the piano. And this will work for both take 1 and take 2 because we did the exact same thing for both of them. That's all the implementation I wanted to do with this. So let's recap what we've done. So we started everything in Reaper. We were working with all these different sections of the piece of music that have all been segmented off using regions, including the reverb tail, which is really important for getting a good loop. We exported everything using the region render matrix and exported all these stems that way and used wildcards in the render to get a very nice, nicely named files. imported everything into Wwise, and then organized it so we could have looping tracks, automatically, randomly going between different takes of the same track, transitioning between different states in using a switch container, transitioning from A to B, B to A, and then when we're exiting, going from A to nothing, and also implemented a way of controlling the volume of the drums and bass using states. So we've specified that when the state is menu quiet, the volume of drums and bass should be -108, which is basically nothing. So that's pretty much it. I hope this has helped you understand a little bit more about interactive music. I think interactive music is amazingly cool, and I think there's so much untapped potential with it, especially as it pertains to jazz, because jazz is some of the most spontaneous music in the moment, and I think it could be really useful, or interactive music could really help recreate some of that in the context of a game or some other media. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you want to listen to Genesis in its entirety, I have a version of it available on streaming services that you can click a link in the description to listen to. And I hope you've learned something from this tutorial, thought more about game music as jazz. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions below. Again, my name is Carlos Eiene. I create jazz music for video games. And thank you for watching.